everybody, and welcome to part 5 of my beginner C++ tutorial. In this episode we're going to be covering how to read input from the user and print it to the screen, or just do math with it. There's a number of things that we can do. So the reason that I showed all these math operators in the last episode was to kind of give a little bit of a backstory to this cin statement. So let's remove all of these. Let's just retype them in a better format. Let's say num1, num2, and results. So we have three integers, none of them have values. And I'm going to prompt the user before we actually look for any input. I'm going to say enter no, the first number. Okay, so let's remove that. Well, now we want the user to be able to enter the first number, so we say cin, and then we're just going to say num1. Now I did this backwards, and when you're when you're using cin, just remember that the arrows need to point to the right. You kind of have to think about it as the console is pointing into the variable. For this one, the variable is pointing into the console, so that's how it's reading it. So we'll see cin num1. Now another thing with the cin command is it actually does an automatic end line, so we don't need to include that ourselves to make another line. If we just start typing another line, it will automatically be on a new one. So we're going to say enter second number. Just end that. Say cin num2. And we're going to say here we're just going to do the math. We're going to say num1, so we're going to give result equals num1 plus num2. Pretty simple. And then we're going to see out. We're going to say the sum of the two numbers is, and we're going to pass in result. And then I'm going to do an end line, and that's our program. Now, there is a problem with this, and I want you guys to take a minute and see if you can figure out what the problem is beforehand. You might not be able to because we haven't covered it yet. So I'm going to hit F5 here, and we're going to run the program. It's going to work at first, but then it's going to fail at a certain point. So it's going to say enter the first number. Well, let's enter 5. Okay, and then I'm going to press enter. Enter the second number. Let's enter 10. Well, it closes. And the reason for that is that the way that cin.get works. The way this works is there is what's known as a buffer, an input buffer, and every key that you enter is put into the input buffer. And all that cin.get does is it reads the last key in the input buffer, and then it uses that to tell whether it needs to close or not. And the last key would be enter because I printed out the sum of the two numbers is, and then or when I got the number, I pressed enter, and that was the last thing in the buffer. Well, there's another way to fix this, and we can use a simple command called system pause. And what this is going to do is it's going to pause the system. So it's using system, if I could spell it right, it's using system pause. Now if I open up my command prompt just to show you guys what this does, this is like the normal Windows command prompt, and if I type in pause, it's going to read press any key to continue, and if I press any key, it's going to move on and continue. That's all this is doing. It's just passing pause as command into the command prompt. So now if we hit F5 and we enter the first number 5, enter the second number 10, it says the sum of the two numbers is 15, and then it says press any key to continue. Okay, let's run that again. Say we want to enter the first number, let's say 5.3. Now, it asks for the second number, but then it just continues on, which is a little weird. Let's try that again. Maybe I hit a key wrong. 3.3, enter. Well, no, I didn't hit a key wrong. Well, this has got to do with the input buffer again. what's happening is it's actually reading 0.3 as a separate number, and then it's giving the sum. It's kind of complicated how it works. It has to do with it being integers. If I were to change these all to floats, it should work correctly, and that's why you just need to make sure that if you're using decimals, or even have a possibility of using decimals, to make sure it's a float. So now if we type 3.3 and enter 5.6, it'll add those two up. So again, just make sure if there's any possibility of it being a decimal point number, always just use a float to be safer. I'm going to make a string here, and we're going to call this name. We're not going to assign anything to it, so this is a string name. And we're going to say here, enter your name. Okay, well then we're going to pass in name. Well, let's remove all this here. We're going to say hello space name and line. I feel like I'm maybe forgetting something. It's not wanting to work. Oh, you know what? I forgot that we have to include something. Now it gets a little complicated. I was thinking like Java, which is a little weird. You can actually just pass in the strings like normal. With C++, you can't do that. I should have known that, but it's a learning lesson for you guys. So if you're trying to use a string and enter a string, it gets a little complicated because the computer doesn't it actually stores strings as numbers, and it can't read a number as this. It's a little bit complicated because the string is actually a container, and it contains multiple characters. It's like a character array, and we're going to get into character arrays in a future tutorial because that's a whole nother episode. So if you would like to, as a little homework assignment, you can look up strings and how to see out with them, because there is a way to do it, and we'll cover that in the future. For now, let's just leave it at that. You can enter numbers in here, do math on the numbers, and then continue from there. Next episode, we're going to be covering if statements, and we'll get more on that next episode. If you have any further questions, and again, I do apologize for this little mess. I forgot that wouldn't work the way it's set up, and we haven't covered it yet. So if you have any questions, leave it in the comments. I will respond as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.